we're not putting enough effort into developing how the product is perceived by the businesses that we sell to. In fact, I even worry that sales might become irrelevant entirely, because if you're not understanding your sales journey, you're not putting the effort in as a salesperson to dig into, okay, what do I need, what does my customer need to know when in order to make a decision, etc., then you're making yourself irrelevant because you haven't done the work to understand what you're doing.
Welcome to the Pantrium Podcast. Here, there's no fluff and no sales pitches, just real conversations. I'm your host, Kristensen, and at Patrium, we bring together bold and curious founders and leaders to share their stories, their lessons they have learned, and the hard truth behind their success. We are all about challenging the status quo and explore fresh perspectives while focusing on what really matters: people. If you're craving deeper conversations, you're in the right space. So let's dive in. Thank you so much, Jozef, for taking the time to join the Pantrium Podcast. I can't wait to deep dive in. I would love for you to introduce yourself and perhaps share a fun fact.
Yeah, great. Nice to be here. Thanks, Christie, for the invite. My name's Jozef. I'm from New Zealand originally. My family's Dutch. I moved here to Copenhagen 4 years ago. Most of my career, I've been in sales and marketing. Fun fact about myself, I spent a lot of my time rowing. I started rowing in New Zealand, and then I joined the Dutch national team. I rowed for the Dutch national team for about 8 years, both at the Beijing Olympics and the London Olympics. It was really the starting point. I was highly competitive, and I took that competitiveness into my sales and marketing all the way through my career. But it was also the starting point of a quest for understanding leadership and everyone's influence on the team around them. For me, this started when I was applying for a job and I was asked, why don't you put leadership down as a quality on your resume? And I thought about that and I thought, well, what does that mean? Like, I'm good at leadership because I was rowing. Why is that the case? I couldn't make the connection. Like, what was I doing that was then providing leadership, and why was that a quality I could add to my resume? That sort of started me thinking, okay, well, what does that actually mean, leadership, and how do you show leadership, and how should, what is sort of required to turn up on a daily basis? How does that translate both in terms of sports, but then how does it translate to the corporate environment? That journey started for me in my rowing career, and something I took right through into my corporate career.
Which big lessons did you learn that you have then adopted from the sports career into the corporate career?
Let me tell you a story about one time I was part of the Dutch men's eight, and we had selections. I got kicked out of the eight at some stage. I was taken out and put in a boat with young guys. We had to do a race together almost the next day. And it went terrible, like absolutely terrible. And we came 22nd place or something like this in the world. It was an international race. From there, I realized if I want to go to the Olympics, this has to work and I have to make this work. So I went to a teams coach from ING at the time, the Dutch bank ING, and asked him to come and work with us and said, look, we need to become a team because we are great individuals, right? Man for man, we've got a lot of potential. We need to come together. We need to come together really fast. And so we worked together over the space of 2 months and went from being 22nd in the world to beating the world champions 2 months later. That taught me the power of what you can achieve with people who are quite different from you, who have different ways of looking at life, who come from different backgrounds, and bring that together and achieve really significant things in a very short space of time. That mentality of seeing the opportunities that people bring and people show up with at work, that's something that I tried to bring into my corporate, all of my corporate career and the teams that I've worked with since then.
And what was it that brought that team together in a short period of time, enabled that going from the 22nd to the first?
We had to have a pretty honest conversation about what we were doing. Why are we making all this effort? Why are we getting up every morning to go rowing to achieve this? We're putting in a bunch of effort. Why exactly for each individual person? Why do we want to be here? Why do we want to make this work? Once we clarified that together, and we had a really open discussion for about 4 hours about that, then how we went about it became really easy. So really understanding our team made sort of the strategy for how we were going to achieve that, super possible. The second thing I'd say is like, because we were such different characters and personalities, we worked a lot on being able to understand what the other person was saying. Let me give an example. There was one time we were preparing for a race, and one of my teammates came up to me and said, "Hey, we should change the oars, the length of the oars." I thought, oh my goodness, we're like minutes from going on the water. What are we doing changing the oars? I just said, no, focus on the race. We need to race, and then we can worry about other things another time. We got off the water, and this teammate was super mad at me. So like, why didn't you listen? What are you doing? We sat down and talked about it. What I realized is that what I wasn't hearing and what he wasn't explaining was that the weather condition had changed. And because we now had a headwind instead of a tailwind, it would be smarter to change the oars. In my mind, I thought, we're focusing on the race. Let's just focus and not stress about little details here. We really need to focus on the race. And there may or may not have been a right and a wrong, but understanding how to articulate to each other in a way that we can communicate, particularly when we have different personalities and communication styles, that became something which made us much stronger. And so that was an early lesson for me about people communicate in very different ways. You need to be quite open to that and open to asking questions and understanding, but also to articulating your own thoughts in a way that they can understand. This is only a tiny example, but it played out again at a second race that we had after that. In exactly the same condition, we were able to make adjustments, and it made a really big difference. Using communication to facilitate the dialogue that you have together really greatly enhanced our team performance and reduced a lot of frustration.
When we look into where you are today and your career, can you briefly explain to people what you do now in the corporate world from the sports world?
So I took a lot of that sort of highly competitive nature and focused that on the fintech industry. I thought that it was at the cutting edge of what was happening, particularly in finance. Previously, I'd worked as an asset manager, and it was quite a slow business, which was interesting, but I wanted to be right at the cutting edge. I moved to London and I helped start a bank there. That gave me a real desire to continue in sales and marketing in the fintech arena. I've worked for several different startups. I moved here to Denmark recently to join Aya. We expanded that to European business and then sold to MasterCard. Still working in sales and marketing. And since then, I've been consulting to different European companies on their sales and marketing strategy. I think there's so much opportunity in this space. There's a lot of companies that build really great products. As they scale, they get a little bit stuck as to their go-to-market strategy and how to progress. So it's right at that juncture between sales and marketing. What is your go-to-market strategy as you expand that I find there's a great demand.
With these startups and businesses to help them with their go-to-market strategy and leadership, what do you see are the recipe for success, and how do they become successful in what they try to achieve?
I'm not so sure there's a single recipe for success across the board. Some of the things I'm seeing, definitely there's a strong, so as people build really, really great products, a lot of companies spend 2 years, 3 years building a really fantastic product, and they get their initial set of customers. Then as they expand and think, let's really scale up this company, and what we're going to do is we're going to hire 5 or 10 salespeople and put them on the floor. What I'm seeing is that a lot of them end up getting stuck, and the sales doesn't quite come as fast as it could be. And this is particularly in the B2B space, I'm noticing this. What I think a lot of the challenge comes down to, and some companies do this really well, but many companies sort of forget the step of, okay, you've built a really great product. You've spent all this time building this product, and it's really good. But how that plays out in the mind of the consumer needs to be understood and developed much more. This is something that in the B2C segment, companies get much better at, because there's more direct feedback. You simply can't sell your product unless you're really understanding your customer and presenting it in a way that they like. Whereas in the B2B space, we tend to get a little bit more academic and rational in the way we present it. And that means that as you send out your sales teams, they're not really talking to the emotions of the customer or the way that the customer will engage with the product. So let me make this a little bit tangible. If you want to buy a Harley Davidson. If I think about a Harley Davidson, I think about a state highway in the US, in California, riding along, the wind in my hair, the sound of the bike, the freedom that it gives me. and everything like that. And so if I go to buy a Harley Davidson, I don't actually buy the product. I buy what value it gives to me. In the B2C space, we put a lot of effort into how the consumer perceives it. But in the B2B space, we need to do much more to build that image of the product in the consumer's head and being able to express that. What I work with a lot of companies on is building that exact thing with them before they scale, before they hire 10 salespeople. You're arming them with, okay, this is how your customer is going to perceive you, and this is how you can differentiate from the rest of your market, rather than just providing virtually the same sort of value proposition as all your competitors offer. So I think in the B2B space, there are some companies that do this really well, but many forget and skip over this step, especially as they go to scale and develop their go-to-market plans for different country expansions.
And are there like a framework or a structure or a process that you bring your clients through as you're trying to help them, set the right team and understand how to go to market in a better way, a more efficient way?
I think it really varies, company by company, but there are two things that I rely on very heavily. One is looking at the numbers, going through the numbers. Very often, really large companies, really big corporates, but also smaller companies, how little data they have in their sales pipeline, how poorly understood their sales pipeline is, both in terms of their CRM pipeline, but also their marketing pipeline. How little they look at how much money they're exactly spending where, and what that then translates to. So deep diving into the numbers, that's definitely one aspect. Beyond that, listening to customers, spending time talking to customers. Oftentimes, CEOs, executives, they do speak to customers, but not in a systematic way. Nobody from the company has spent enough time really listening to what the customer is actually saying about their product and how their buying decision process was, what they liked and who they had to convince internally, etc. Understanding that much better provides the framework for how you build out your sales strategy or your sales process, help your team, and also how you build out your brand and develop your brand further. I'd say speaking to customers and listening to them is definitely something that you work a lot with as well. But I'd say that's a number one concern. And then really getting into the numbers. I think the numbers drive your decision making. It definitely can help drive your decision making much better.
Could you share some of those examples, who you see out there are doing it well and those who are not, just for us to bring that example to life?
Yeah, so what big brands, so let's take Klarna, for example. Klarna does a really great job speaking directly to their customers. Their customers are small or medium-sized businesses in a checkout environment, and Klarna does a brilliant job positioning themselves specifically for those customers. They have a very clear understanding about who they are and what they're doing, and they do a fantastic job. I think that would be a good big brand example to use.
And when we start looking into the future, what is it that you would like to challenge or see change in the sector or the industry?
I think we covered that a little bit. In the fintech industry, a lot of sales is B2B in fintech. So it's a lot sales to banks or other financial institutions. I strongly feel we're not putting enough effort into developing how the product is perceived by the businesses that we sell to and developing that out. So I'd love to see more of that. There's also great opportunities with AI, for example, in terms of how AI can help fintechs, customer success areas, and as a developer, AI can help you tremendously. There's also great opportunity for AI in sales process. And where I see companies doing that really well, first understand deeply how their customers are buying their product, what their sales process should be, and having that really nailed down, and then using AI to sort of fast track and develop that. There's a big gap in the market between companies that are doing that well and companies that don't understand their customer journey, buying journey, how to speak to their customers at different stages, what they need. And then AI becomes irrelevant. In fact, I even worry that sales might become irrelevant entirely, because if you're not understanding your sales journey, you're not putting the effort in as a salesperson to dig into, okay, what do I need? What does my customer need to know when, in order to make a decision, etc. Then you're making yourself irrelevant because you haven't done the work to understand what you're doing. So in those cases, I think AI is going to make or salespeople are going to make themselves redundant to AI. I don't think AI is going to overtake salespeople, but the other way around. They're going to salespeople in that case are going to bow out to AI by not investing enough in understanding their customers properly.
Who are you following these days that inspires you with everything we talked about, leadership, sales and marketing? You mentioned AI as well. Are there anyone out there in the industry that you follow and would recommend others to follow?
We live here in Copenhagen, and I mean, it's such a brilliant city, and there's so much happening in terms of design. So I try and immerse myself a lot in a lot of the design that Copenhagen and all of the artists here have to offer. So that's been really, really beneficial and really great way to sort of expand your thinking. Specifically, I follow Chris Walker a lot. Some of the work he's doing has been really, really great. His sort of mantra of getting into the numbers and really looking at what's happening, particularly from a marketing perspective. So for people, heads of marketing, for example, CMOs, diving deeper and deeper into those numbers as your go-to-market strategy. Definitely listen to what Chris Walker is saying, his message of both getting into the numbers, but looking at ROI from a total cost perspective and a total funnel perspective. I'm a really big fan of that. So I follow some of his work.
And when we look ahead, what do you think will define the next 5 years?
Clearly, AI is having a really big influence. And I think, as I mentioned, in the product space as a developer tool, it's making a really big impact. In sales and marketing, I think it's most specifically the case that for the companies that can understand their clients the best and really get their sales process, AI is going to accelerate significantly that sales process. You're going to sell 4 times more than you were, let's say. But for customers who don't understand the sales process, it will basically mean that the impact is the inverse, and they'll fall further behind. So it's either understand your customer and understand how they think and perceive your product and be good at pitching to that imaginary product. If you're good at that, then AI is going to be a really great tool and your company is going to flourish. Otherwise, I think for companies that don't put the hard work into understanding their customer buying journey, AI is going to cause them to fall behind.
And now you mentioned the imaginary product. What is that?
Well, let's take the Harley Davidson example that I presented before. When I go to buy a Harley Davidson, you can sell it to me and say, it's got this chrome, this great paint job, and an engine with so many cc's of power, and it makes a really large noise. But really, that's not interesting to me. Yes, the design is appealing, but what really appeals to me is how I feel and think about myself and what I imagine when I think about riding a Harley. And so what I'm really buying when I'm buying a Harley Davidson is what I'm imagining I will do, or what I imagine how I will feel when I'm riding a Harley Davidson. That's actually the product that you're buying. You're buying the imagination rather than the raw product. In the consumer space, we get quite good at this, but in the B2B space, we think we're just selling to a corporate and it doesn't have a person at the other end, or it doesn't have a team who's going to build something for people. We're not so good at this. It makes a big difference because, and the reason why this matters is not just in terms of your own sales, but in a B2B space, you often have two salespeople, right? So you have your own sales, like you yourself selling to the company. But then you also have the person at that company, they have to sell to all the stakeholders. So they're going to sell to the 20 people who they need to get on board. Let's say you sell to a bank. They're going to need to convince 40, 50, 60 people in order, that they sign the contract with you. So you're going to enable another person to do the selling for you. And if your sales pitch is, well, hey, you got this product and it's got some chrome and it's got, so many cc power, etc., it's going to be a tough job for you to sell to this other person, but it's going to be even tougher for them to sell internally. For the companies that we really can do much more in this space is to help the people we're selling to sell within their company our products, helping build out this product. And we've got some really great design studios here in Denmark, London, also Amsterdam. There's so many really great design studios who help in this space, but investing in this is going to make the difference.
As we started this dialogue, we talked about leadership and who has made the biggest impression on you, a leader through your career?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say probably Some of the people that I've had the opportunity to row with, like some of my teammates from my rowing career, have been really inspiring leaders, both in terms of their own rowing, but also the way that they conducted themselves off the field. A colleague of mine once said to me, one of the companies I work for, you're not a great employee unless you're also being a great father, husband, friend, etc. I think that's really true. I think that's a great saying to keep in mind.
Jozef, I really enjoyed this chat, and I think there's so many good nuggets and insights that you've shared. And again, I just wanted to thank you so much for coming on, and I really appreciate all your insights.
Really great, Christie. I love what you're doing with Pantrium. I love the idea and the concept. It's really cool to see.
If this episode gave you something to think about, I'll be really grateful if you could share this with your LinkedIn network. And to make sure you don't miss out on any new episodes, simply follow Patrium wherever you are listening or watching. And just a note, the opinions and views shared by our guests are entirely their own and don't necessarily represent the businesses they work for. We really hope you enjoyed this episode. Until next time, bye for now.